Welcome back. I'm Gary Parr, and you are listening to Fiber Talk, the twice-weekly podcast for needlework artists. And our guest this week, from Sassy Jacks, Allie Dudley. Hi, Allie.
Hi, Gary.
Thanks for joining us here. And speaking of Sassy Jacks, this show is sponsored by Sassy Jacks. Please support our sponsors. They are what makes this thing happen, I'll tell you that. So Allie, first met Allie, was probably a year and a half ago now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at my first trip to Sassy Jacks, and Allie was working in the store there, and I was just kind of feeling my way around trying to figure out what was going on, and you were handling linen and everything else, and so is that where you really got an interest in needlework, was when you ended up there? I mean, how did you even end up at Sassy Jacks?
Yeah, so I moved to Asheville. It was probably about 2.5, maybe 3 years ago now. And I was cross-stitching a little bit, but I wasn't super intense about it. I moved there because I'm a weaver primarily, and I went to take a 2-month class at Penland Craft School up in Spruce Pine, which is about an hour north of Asheville. Loved it so much that I was like, I have to move here. So I moved to Asheville, and one of my friends who lives around Weaverville, where Sassy Jacks is, was like, oh, you cross-stitch, you have to go check this place out. And I was like, well, a local needlework store? What is that? I'd only ever gotten stuff like patterns on Etsy and gone to, like Joann's and stuff to buy floss. And I walked in and I was like, this is a whole new world for me. And Kim helped me pick out some patterns and some linen. I had stitched on linen maybe once before, so she really, set me on my path, I guess. I wouldn't be doing the stuff that I am today without her. But it really was really special to find my local needlework shop for the first time. I was really, really, truly blown away by it. And after a while of me hanging out there and being the only person coming to the Tuesday afternoon stitch group, Kim was like, you're here a lot. Do you just want a job? So she hired me.
Hey, that works out. So
yeah.
when did you start cross-stitching? Just something to do? Did you learn from family members or what?
I think that I learned the basics when I was really little. When I was a kid, my grandma taught me how to knit, and she taught me a little bit of really basic hand sewing. But I got into it when I was in college. A lot of the stuff that I was into cross stitching was sort of patterns that had a sampler aesthetic, but had modern, content. So all those sassy sayings that,
Oh yeah.
Stuff like that with curse words and floral borders and whatever, was how I got into it at first. And then, after doing some of those, I started stitching actual samplers, reproduction stuff. And I think that starting out with the, kind of pop culture kind of things is sort of something that's carried through to the work that I am doing today. I really like to take traditional media and then put a modern twist on it, or put some modern words into the traditional sampler format.
Mm-hmm. So in college, cross stitching, was it just a group of you that it was a release from school?
Oh, it was really just me by myself.
Oh, you solo all the way. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't think that I had a lot of friends. I had some friends who were knitters in college, but that was really about it. I don't think I knew any stitchers back then. Yeah,
I never, of course, when I went to school, it was guys' dorms and girls' dorms separate, mm-hmm. and don't ever go in. And so I never, of course, in guys, I mean, there was no way there was any needlework going on, but I never knew if that was at all prevalent in the women's dorms, if that was something that people did, especially knitting. You'd think that would be a nice escape to, because it's so portable.
Yeah. I mean, I started knitting. I was a film major when I was in college, and I ended up knitting a lot to stay awake during my screenings that I would have to go to. There's some classes where I would have to watch 6 hours of movies a week, and sometimes it was a silent movie with no soundtrack.
Oh my.
So there were a couple of days where I would bring an easy sweater that was just a big stockinette stitch tube that I didn't have to think about. And halfway through the screening, I would look around, all my friends would be asleep, but I would still be awake because I was knitting.
Yeah, that's the one plus of knitting is you can do it without looking after a while. Yeah. I've tried it a couple of times, did nothing for me, but yeah, I've seen many knitters just sit there watching a movie or whatever, and you just see the thing just growing out of their hands. And,
yeah.
So then you run into Kim, and of course, she's one of the great enablers of our time.
It's true.
Yeah. So then you get hooked on what kind of needlework did you get hooked on? Was it reproduction samplers?
Let's see. The first couple ones I did, I think I did some of the like primitive hair patterns. Those really got me, at first. And then I think that I really like walked in there because I was working on, a Quaker sampler that I gotten from Modern Folk Embroidery. I had ordered a kit from his website that was the first thing I'd ever stitched on linen. And it was, with, some wool that he had dyed himself. And I had run out of all the wool, and I was like, oh my God, there's no way that I can ever find this color again, because it was like hand dyed with madder and this beautiful like pinky red color. And I walked in there with like this skein or like the last couple threads of this wool, and I was like, I need help. I need to match this thing. And it turned out that we found the like perfect exact color match in one of the Gentle Art wools. And so I was working on that sampler when I first got there. And I've done, let's see, I haven't done too many big samplers, but I've done a couple from Modern Folk that I really like. And I kind of, I'm not somebody who really likes to do a reproduction sampler exactly the way that it's charted, or, I like to fix mistakes that are in like, the original, and I like to move stuff around and change colors. So I'm not like a purist in that way, but I do really enjoy looking at antiques, because one of the things that Kim has gotten me to do for her, and even though I don't live in Asheville right now, what I do for her now is look at her antiques and chart them into the computer, and then do all the publishing layout and stuff for them. So I actually look at a lot of antique samplers right now, and I really enjoy like the mystery kind of figuring out like how they stitched them, or like why they did it this way. I just like solving problems. I think antique samplers present a lot of problems for me to solve sometimes.
No, I'm sure they do. Yeah, that whole process just intrigues me. So you have actually taken the originals and charted them, haven't you?
Yeah, I've done a couple for Kim so far. We have a couple that I finished that we haven't put out yet too, but like we had the AC Quaker Bluebird was the first one that I did.
Right.
And then the Saxon band sampler that's our stitch along for this year, that was pretty tough because it was reversibly stitched. And so it made the stitches on the front like look different than I was used to. And I definitely learned a lot when I was doing that one. And I also, sometimes there's just the colors have changed so much over the years that it turns out to look like 5 different shades of beige, and it's really hard to pull out what. And
it's just one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But which one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that. That deciphering a reversible sampler. Mm-hmm. What is the process there? Do you actually get out a doodle cloth and practice to see if you can replicate it, or how do you go about that? Because that can't be easy.
It's not for that one. Since it was probably the second thing I ever charted, I didn't, go about it with the intent of figuring out exactly how all of the stitches were done. That one was also all cross stitch and back stitch, I believe. So it's, a lot easier to see the stitches than if it was something that had a lot of like Montenegrin stitch or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I'm still like, I'm really intrigued by stitching reversibly, because I got to take the Bethia class with Nicola when she was at Sassy Jack's in the spring. And I haven't started that sampler yet, but I really love just like solving the puzzle of like, how do I do this? How do I make this stitch look the way I want it to on the front and the back? I think it's a fun part about it for me.
Yeah, I haven't done that one yet either. We got, Vaughn and I got caught up in the Queen sampler, which is reversibly stitched. And yeah, it is fun solving the problem and figuring it out, and then remembering to do it the same every time and pay attention to what's going on in the back. 'Cause I can't tell you how many times I've done 10 stitches and turned it over and go, really, in the middle here, I just lapsed into normal.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't lapse into normal. And so
Yeah.
out it comes and clean it up. And it's a different dimension, stitching reversibly, but then it's made a better stitcher out of me because I'm much more aware of where the thread is going and where it's coming back up and what it's doing. And I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah. It's definitely helped me, become a better stitcher also. I think there's a lot of stuff that I didn't think about when I was stitching that after learning about reversible stitching, now I try to make my backs look really neat even if it's not reversible, and like bury my thread in a proper way and whatever. So I think I just love to learn, and that really provided a good opportunity for me to try something new.
Yep. Well, I'm a stickler for the backside. It's got to be clean and neat. I don't know. I don't care if you'll never see it. It's just I just have to know that what's behind there is as neat as it can be. And I get, I'll admit I get sloppy sometimes, particularly, well, not with needlepoint, but I do with cross stitch, because I want to go over here and I'll change the pattern, the stitching pattern. So I ended up over there, and there's some spots, always some spots that I go, boy, I could have done that neater on the back. But then at some point, hey, let's just move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you describe yourself. It was the part that really stuck out for me. Always drawn to historical textiles. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? What does that mean to you?
So a lot of the work that I do in my weaving practice, especially kind of is about historical textiles. When I first started weaving, I knew immediately like the reason why I wanted to weave was to weave Appalachian coverlets. I had a friend who went to Warren Wilson College who I was visiting before I moved to Asheville, like several years before that, who saw me knitting. And she was a part of the weaving work study crew. And she said, you have to come check out our weaving studio because you like fiber. You're probably going to be really into this. And I remember walking in and seeing all these looms set up. And somebody was weaving a blooming leaf coverlet, which is like a really beautiful traditional pattern that has like a huge motif on it, like this undulating wave. And I looked at it and I was like, that's what I want to do. I need to weave overshot coverlets. And so just like from the beginning of my weaving journey, especially, I've been, trying to learn more about how people used to weave. I think that there's a lot of like knowledge, especially around weaving, that is like really traditional and has been passed down. There's like a really long lineage of weavers that share with people. And I think it's something that people who aren't involved in a craft like don't necessarily have as a part of their lives. And I really am interested in having that like link to my craft lineage. And I think through looking at historical textiles and working them into my own practice, I am connecting with that lineage in a way that's really meaningful for me. And for my weaving stuff, I have only woven one coverlet so far through some circumstances kind of out of my control. I have been able to weave on my floor looms in a couple months, but that is definitely on the docket for me to make more of once I move to Virginia. And I'm also a tapestry weaver, which is a different structure than coverlet weaving. Coverlets.
Yeah. What are these coverlets and what are they used for?
Yeah. So they're a bed covering. It's kind of like a blanket, but they are things that are traditional to the Appalachians. People wove them in other places of the world, but the ones that I have looked at, since that's where I lived, are mostly from that area. But they are the overshot coverlets, which are the ones that I really love, are a specific structure that has a plain weave ground cloth, and then over top and like in between those layers, you weave with a wool pattern weft. So you have these like different areas of like blocks of color and like half tones that kind of make these really beautiful op art looking designs, and they look really, really modern, even though if you look at them, some that were woven in like the 1800s, they kind of look like things that would have been woven by cool, funky, hip new artists in the 60s. And I think that just like it was surprising to me when I found out that people were making things that looked like this for so long, and still are. And yeah, I have a coverlet on my bed right now that was from my family. I'm not really sure where it came from, but I realized after I started weaving, and I saw this blanket at my parents' house. I did take it from them. I was like, I need to have this. You can share one of these with me. I realized that like I'd been looking at this for a long time in my life, but just hadn't really known what it was. So
yeah. And the looms you use, what are these, fairly portable? Are they big frames? These big
they're
frames.
Not portable. I have 2 floor looms. One of them I can take apart and put in my car, but nothing else can go in my car.
Oh my!
While it's in there. That one is a Norwegian style counterbalance loom, which is a specific kind of shaft loom. So it's pretty big. I would say it's about like a 5 foot by 5 foot by 5 foot cube. And because it has some stuff that hangs down from it. And it's painted blue, which I really like. I got that one from the University of North Georgia. They were divesting of a couple old looms, and they just gave that one to me. So I'm really, really grateful for that. And then I have another loom that is a Makeomer jack loom, which is it's got about a 4 or 5 foot weaving width, and that one's really big and really heavy and doesn't come apart.
Oh.
Which is why I've had to have them in storage since I had to move out of my house in April. But that one is cool. I'm looking forward to weaving some really big tapestries on that one too, since it's big and sturdy and can handle something like that.
So that is, of course, I know absolutely nothing, but to do bigger tapestries, then you literally need a bigger loom. You can't just use a smaller one and keep adding on.
Right. You kind of the width is really the thing that constricts you. You could, like sew panels together, but in order to like have the space to weave a wide tapestry, you do need to have a wide loom.
So these just have to go in storage. Now, are these things made today, or do you get them handed down? Is that generally how it's done? Is somebody wants to be rid of one, so you get lucky and get one, or are there people who manufacture them?
There are people who still manufacture them, but there are so many weavers who, get older and don't have the time or the space and get rid of their looms that I think that most people probably come about them through, finding them on the internet or word of mouth. Once you get a loom too, people will come to you and give them to you and be like, please take this loom off of my hands. I don't need it anymore. It's like the weaver's curse. There's always looms out there that you want, but you don't have enough room for them. Yeah.
So that literally is the defining factor, is just how much space, literal open space that you have.
Yeah, pretty much. When I first moved to Asheville, I was apprenticing with a weaver named Melissa Dewey, who is so fabulous. She is somebody who, she knows a lot about history. I believe that she used to teach history at college, and she was really excited about having our tiny little studio that we had in the Western North Carolina farmers market that was about 10 foot by 10 foot, just packed full of looms. I really don't know how she did it. But she used to tell me that, the loom was like the most important part of a weaver's household. And so sometimes they would like put it in their bedroom and have to crawl through it in order to get to bed. But it's like, you got to have it in your house. Where else are you going to put it? Weavers often will like arrange their lives around their looms.
Well, hey, if you're dedicated, you're dedicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we have these massive, I assume, all wood structures.
Yeah.
Is there much metal in them?
The counterbalance loom that I have, the blue one, is all metal, it's all wood. It even has like some wood screws and wood pulleys on it. But the jack loom, which is kind of a more modern style, the jack looms got really popular in the 60s. Those have a lot of metal in them, which is why they're, a lot heavier and harder to move around.
Now, when something breaks or wears out, do you have to have someone create that part, or is that another search through the internet for for busted looms so you can steal parts from them?
It kind of depends. For some looms, like a lot of the pieces that can break are really simple. There's a lot of just like dowels or sticks that you can, find pretty easily. But I did have a gear break on my Makeomer loom, just like the cast iron peg popped off of the gear when I was in the middle of using it because it wasn't set up correctly. And I called them and they just sent me, like, I bought a new one from them. So there are people who are still making them. If, the company that made the loom originally is still around, they usually are really good about helping you with your problems.
Well, that's comfort.
Yeah.
So you mentioned 2 or 3 loom names. What is the difference? Are they different looms for different types of fabric, or is it just different techniques? How does that all sort out?
It kind of depends. Let's see. So
I don't want to hear it depends now, Allie.
Yeah. Different companies make different kinds of looms. Some of them are, better suited for different kinds of textiles. So the counterbalance loom that I mentioned, it's not as like heavy just physically, and it's used less for like really weft face stuff, which kind of requires you to beat harder. And like weft face is when you can't see any of the warp that you put on the loom. Like usually it's covered up by all of the other fabric or the other wool or, weft, whatever that you put in there. And so like my Makeomer, it's a lot heavier. So I use that to weave rugs. And it's why I want to use it to weave tapestry because I actually can, beat harder on the fabric as I'm weaving it to, cover up all of the warp ends. There's a lot of different factors that would go into, what kind of loom you want to use for a different project, but often it comes down to like, what is the loom that I have? And usually, okay. You can get away with, doing a lot of stuff on a lot of different kinds of looms. So
okay.
It's kind of sometimes just a question of availability.
Do you find that you have a couple of looms? Do you find that you start to specialize or get more efficient or better skilled at using one loom or the other, and so you tend to use that one more, or is it just simply dictated by what you want to weave?
I think for me it's what I want to weave. But it is nice that I have the option of 2. Like some people only have one loom, and so you gotta make do with that. But I do have like one loom that I would use for heavier fabrics and one loom that I would use for lighter weight, more delicate stuff. And sometimes like when you set up a loom, you have to thread it. And if you want to change the threading, like on my Makeomer, it's a lot more involved, but, because I have to take all the warp out and like put a whole new warp in. But if I wanted to do that on my other loom, there's a way that I can just like slide off a bunch of pieces and then slide on some new ones. And it takes a lot less time to change the kind of fabric that I'm going to use for that one. So if you don't know a lot about weaving jargon, this might be really confusing, and I feel like I'm trying to explain it in a way without using a lot of weaving words because there are a lot of words that don't mean anything to you unless you're a weaver.
I'm sure it's its own language like anything else. Yeah. No, I'm just trying to get a sense of what this is like. Yeah. And what's involved. I don't want to become a weaver. Don't want to thoroughly understand it. Just trying to get a sense because for anybody who does needlework, if it wasn't for weaving, we wouldn't have anything to work on. So, it's interesting to learn. So this was it Penwell School?
Penland Craft
Penland School. So what was that? Was that a weaving school? What was your experience there?
Yeah. So let's see. I first started weaving at the Chicago Weaving School in Chicago. I would take classes there once a week, go in for like 4 hours, and I got Natalie Boyette, who's the teacher there, is really a true gem. She like walks you through weaving a sampler, and she really lit my fire for weaving. And once I decided
wait a minute. Yeah. So there are samplers for weavers?
Yeah, it's sort of like
of course there are. Why not?
Yes. I use mine as a scarf now. We learned a lot of different ways that you can weave on the same kind of warp. So there's, plain weave and twill and basket weave. And this all depends on like which threads you're raising and lowering, learning how to do different structures. And that's a good way to, figure out what kind of thing you're interested in learning more about. And so that was a really like formative experience for me for sure. And I decided that I was going to move out of Chicago and ended up going to Penland to take a 2-month-long weaving class there in the spring of 2017. And that was a really special time because, you're there and all you're doing is weaving, or, if you're there for a woodworking class, all you're doing is woodworking, and you don't have to like think about anything except for working on your craft.
So this is a school for multiple crafts then?
Yeah, they have pretty much any craft you can imagine. They've got like glass blowing and metal smithing and clay and a lot of really good stuff going on there.
So a place where they keep all those old skills alive then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the best.
Penland was founded as a weaving school originally too, so they have a lot of old looms, and the most beautiful room on campus is the weaving room. It's got like this big fireplace and wood floors, and it's really special to be there and know how many generations of weavers have spent time in there before me.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like fun. So you spend how long did you spend there? Did you say?
I was there for 2 months, and then I've been back to take a couple classes and do a residency since then. But it's a really nice place to just drop in and out of too, because it's not far from Asheville.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that whole area. I mean, that's one of the neat things that I've enjoyed and really haven't explored very much, but really should. Is there's so much art of all kinds in that whole area, Asheville, Weaverville. You can just tell, just walking around, that there's just art. And if you go to the right spot and see the right people, you can really learn some amazing things.
Mm-hmm. And that part of the country really is special too for the like number of craft schools that they have. There's also like Aramont Craft School and the John C. Campbell Folk School, which I've also been to. It was a really great resource to just have all of those, weavers and craftspeople around, helping me figure out what I want to do.
So how do these schools work? I mean, is it all short-term classes, or do they have regular courses of study?
For the most part, they're short-term. They can go from like a couple weeks to a couple months. But there are, there's some community college, like Haywood Community College, which is in Waynesville, North Carolina, has like a longer term, like degree program where you can learn about craft. But it's, if you've already done college, it's sometimes easier to just go do something for a couple weeks than for a couple years.
Yes. No question about that. Yeah. I don't need a semester of your stuff. Thank you very much. Or to pay for it. Either one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the Aramont school then? What was that, more weaving, or did you learn other things?
That's kind of a similar deal where they have a lot of different kinds of crafts going on. And I've been there twice now I assisted a class with Tommy Scanlon, who's a tapestry weaver. She's also another person who I really, I wouldn't be where I am without her. She's so special and so generous with sharing her skills. And she's brought me around to a lot of different schools to help her teach. And I assisted a tapestry class with her there. And then just this October, I went back to assist a sewing class with Carol Colburn, who's a really great sewer, and a person who studies historical textiles also. But that place, it's in Gatlinburg, which is definitely a different vibe than, middle of the woods, North Carolina.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that when you learn from a weaver, is it technique or is it the art? I mean, there's certainly an art element to this weaving, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, I've had teachers who do both. For me, I think that, a good example of when I was really just learning technique more than anything else is when I was working with Melissa Dewey. Her weaving company is called Mountain Mama Weavers, and she really was trying to hammer home how to weave quickly and efficiently for me. And so she taught me a lot of tricks that were just like, this is how you set up your loom fast. This is like another specific little thing that you can do to make things, go faster for you. And she was really about making products that people would want to buy, but also was, affordable and not like super crazy expensive. So we would weave a lot of dish towels and like rugs made out of sock seconds from a sock mill. And I learned a lot from her about just like being good at hand weaving and production weaving, which is, a pretty different kind of thing than from weaving tapestry, which is, a lot slower and produces different kinds of textiles that are often meant to be hung on a wall or looked at more than like stepped on and used to dry your dishes. So my Tommy Scanlon, who's my tapestry teacher and mentor and good friend, really the stuff that I've learned from her has been more, I guess I would say aesthetic focused or, not necessarily about, there's a lot of skill that's involved in tapestry for sure, but that is more a skill of how to communicate through your weaving an image or some kind of like aesthetic idea instead of, how to weave a dish towel really quickly.
Where do you tend to migrate toward the art end or the functional end?
It's kind of hard for me to say. I think that both are very important to me. I find that like I really value skill in hand weaving. Like I really try and push myself to make things that are like well made. So I think like I value the craftsmanship, but I also, aesthetics are important to me. And if I weave tapestry, so I obviously really care about how things look. I think it's a balance. And they also like work different parts of my brain too. So like tapestry weaving is, physically just like how you do it is pretty different than weaving on a floor loom. So I am also like always trying to combine these two things and put them together. I wove a coverlet that was mostly woven on a floor. It was all woven on a floor loom, but I ended up weaving a little like inset of tapestry inside of it. So that was me trying to like take this one kind of art form that I do and put it into another one. Yeah. So I really like to. Where is the boundary between art and craft? Is there one? I don't know. This is a question that I ask myself every day.
Yeah. Well, and see, I can just listening to you talk, I can tell that there would be times where just doing functional weaving to make a towel or something would have its own kind of zen where, the loom must have a rhythm and a noise to it that you can just get lost in. And, rather than sitting there and figuring out when am I going to start the next color and what color should I use and that kind of thing. There must be that element of just mindless weaving just because I can just sit here and just go and just let myself just release within it.
Yeah, I really love that. I really love both of the aspects of weaving. I think one thing that I really liked about it when I first started weaving, like I'm really bad at drawing and I really hate a blank page. So having like the grid of the weaving structure to work within was a really like helpful way for me to jump into it as an art form, And I like doing all the planning, figuring everything out, and then just doing it and not having to ask any questions while I'm weaving. Just follow the plan that's already done. I don't need to make any decisions anymore.
Yeah. And threads, yarn, whatever you're using, must be massive quantities of that.
Yeah, it for weaving, like production weaving, usually, you would think about it in pounds of yarn.
Okay.
But yeah, it kind of depends on what you're going for. Tapestry, sometimes it's, you use smaller amounts of color, but more variety. So I like to use a lot of scraps in my weaving too.
Okay. Yeah. So then just trying to take this back to needlework then. Mm-hmm. When you work on linens, does your weaving help you in determining linen quality or do they not relate?
I don't know if I think too much about the quality of the
Okay.
linen necessarily that I'm working on, just because, all the stuff that I use, it's from like I trust I trust the Zweigert mill to, give
Right.
me the good stuff. I definitely do want to like learn, or I probably know how to do it already, but haven't actually tried it yet. I want to try weaving some just like plain weave fabric to stitch on, but I haven't found the time to do that quite yet.
Yeah, that would be
That's
an interesting thing to weave your own fabric and then stitch on it. And I bet that'll tell you some things about your weaving.
Yeah, it really will. I another class that I have taken with one of my weaving teachers, Cassie Dixon. She's a really great weaver who is also a stitcher. She also grows and processes and weaves with her own flax into linen and has silkworms. So she is kind of doing the farm to table stitching dream of, raising everything herself. I'm not sure how much of the, that she actually does, where everything she's using for her pieces is raised by her, but it is possible. And taking that class with her and spinning my own linen for the first time was really eye-opening of like how hard it is to make linen that's so fine as the stuff that I usually stitch on. My linen felt like a burlap bag the first time that I wove with stuff I had spun. So I need to practice that before I can really get to that point for sure.
Yeah, well, that was the first time I saw someone spinning sheep wool into yarn. And it was at some, county fair thing, sitting there with a spinning wheel. And finally I had to be dragged away because I was just fascinated by how they could just with their fingers control the width, the thickness of the thread of the yarn. And then you take that all the way down to, say, weaving 40 count linen that you can stitch on, and how, taking that from flax or whatever the original fiber is and getting it so you can do that kind of thing. There's got to be some real skill and art to that.
Yeah, it is for sure.
Yeah.
I've done mostly wool spinning, but I know what you mean about like being really enraptured by watching somebody do it. It's so like there's something about spinning and weaving to me that's just like so magical. And I have a drop spindle that I take with me sometimes to, do in my downtime while I'm like waiting for a bus or whatever. I'll like break out my spindle, and sometimes like people will just watch me just because they've never seen something like that before. And like kids especially get so like enraptured by this magical object that they don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, in this day and age, that kind of thing is just not seen anymore. And people don't appreciate, I don't think they even think about or realize that at some point all the cloth we use has to come from some fiber somewhere. And
Yeah.
whether it's machine or hand, it has to get made into thread that gets woven into cloth that gets dyed or whatever. And, we just don't think about it.
Yeah. I remember I was telling a friend who's not a fiber person about that, because like I was spinning and he was like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm spinning." And then I started to explain, like, back in the day before the Industrial Revolution, everything that you would have worn, like somebody had to spin all the fibers for it and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, "Okay, you got to stop talking because my brain can't process that right now. I need to go like think about this. You just totally changed my whole worldview."
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, all of that stuff. Because when I watch Arlene Cohen do bobbin lace, and sit there and flip those bobbins over each other and around each other, and then over time out comes this beautiful lace that now is done by machine. But yeah, there's another process that slow, highly skilled people who are sitting there all day, every day, pounding that stuff out. And now lace, I'm sure that there are machines that crank it out by the yards per minute. And that's, to me, that's what's so neat when you talk about those schools is it's like I said, keeping those old skills alive, because it's awful easy to let them die. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was working with Melissa Dewey too, because we were at the farmers market, we would often, have a spinning day where we would sit out front and spin, or, people would come up and watch us weave. And there would be a lot of people who would say like, oh, like my grandma used to do this, and like tell us a whole story about like their memories of it. Or sometimes they would say, oh, it's such a shame that this is dying out. But I really don't think that it is. I think that right now, there's a lot of young people who are weaving, which is mostly what I can speak to, but I see people doing this with a lot of other crafts. There's a lot of young people interested in weaving and spinning and dyeing, and trying to like connect with that history that sometimes feels like it's lost, but I think it's really starting to come back, and that's really encouraging for me.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I have picked up on, at least my perception, that younger people are starting to look for things that aren't on a screen, and find ways to make, create, bring back some of those old skills and use their time still as a hobby, but something comes out the other end,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Rather than a whole stream of texts. Yeah. Yeah. So let's get back to your reproduction sampler work. Because that's another area that there's another old skill, old technique that, with all these reproduction samplers and the massive amount of people who are stitching them, that's another one that's being kept alive. And to me, that's that's what makes it exciting, is that we're able to reproduce these things and create anew, and keep those learning tools that those little girls used for school, keep them alive and refresh them, and then people like you who are changing them to make them their own. That's a whole nother dimension, and I think it's just so fun. And so, what do you take out of the reproduction work you've done for Kim? Is it what do you learn in terms of what those girls were doing?
I mean, I think a lot of it, like, I feel connected to them when I take the stuff that they did and then like I change it around to do my own, because you can kind of see in a lot of samplers that kids are stitching like stuff that they put in that kind of shows some of their personality. So, like the kinds of like little dogs that they put in, or like what color they made this bird, or like why did you use this weird bright purple and everything else is like super bland, It's just fun to like see their little personalities come out. And it's kind of funny to think about, maybe if somebody finds the sampler I did in a couple 100 years, what will they think about me and what my choices were?
Right.
But I also have, not that samplers aren't, a useful thing, because they totally are, but I have started to do a little bit of sewing recently, and using my sampler knowledge that I've gained to do kind of, what they were trying to do, and start like monogramming stuff on shirts and things like that.
Sure.
I think that's been an exciting dimension to add to my work. It's just, using that knowledge kind of in the way that it was intended to be used eventually after making samplers, just applying it to clothes. So,
well, yeah. And if you go on Instagram and just follow the hashtag embroidery, the parade of things you'll see every day for what people are doing on clothes is a lot of fun to watch, and a lot of it quite amazing. And it's mostly young people doing it. There's a lot of young people who are saying, wait a minute, I can take this shirt and make it into something. And yeah, makes it fun. Yep. All right, so you're moving on to this farm. This is after the first of the year?
I am moving on the solstice, so in just a couple weeks. December 21st is the date. But I have a good friend, Laurel Erdel, who has a farm down in Farmville, Virginia, that she is trying to turn into sort of like
I love that, a farm in Farmville. Okay.
Yeah, I tell people moving to Farmville, and they're like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Moving on to a farm." They're like, "Oh, I should have known."
Yeah.
But she is a paper maker and a book maker and a ceramicist, and so she wants to have people come and use her space to like work with the land and have the stuff that they do on the land like fuel their art, which is really exactly what I am looking for in my life. Like a connection to the land that I see a lot, and the historical textiles and things that I read about weavers of yore. A lot, I really want to grow my own flax and, process it and weave with it. And I know that doing something like that is going to take some time. So I got to get started now if I want to be any good at it. But we've got some plans to like grow some dye plants, and, sheep are maybe on the horizon, but I'm not really, like, I wouldn't call myself a farmer. I really am coming at it from, I know the kind of work that I want to be doing with the products that I'm already using, and I want to, learn more about how, the stuff that I weave with and stitch with has gotten to the stage where I can use it already. So what goes into making the yarn, what goes into making the linen.
Yeah. So is this like a communal arrangement where you live there? How is that set up?
So far it is pretty low key. I don't think that I would call it like a commune or anything yet, but we'll see. It's just, right now it's a house with some people living in it who are kind of like-minded.
Okay.
And wanna farm.
It's a big place. I mean, a lot of acreage.
I do not know the acreage.
Oh.
But it's a good sized house, and I think right now there are like 4 people living there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and it sounds like it's right up your alley, because, I mean, just even looking at your website and just talking to you a little bit, your desire to get back to a constant connection with nature. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like it's going to be perfect for you.
Yeah, I'm really excited. In my other life, I also work at a nature summer camp. So I do a lot of like hanging out with kids in the woods, building fires and looking at plants and playing in the dirt and all that good stuff. So it'll be nice to do more of that, and also, tie it in with my fiber work a little bit too, which I haven't had a chance to do quite yet.
Yep. Well, we'll definitely have to have you back after you've harvested flax and actually made it into something you can weave with. That'll be interesting.
Interesting, definitely. We'll see. Like, usable might be a little bit further down the pipeline.
Yeah, I watched one video, a guy who just grew a little patch in his backyard of flax, mm-hmm. and then showed how he took it all the way to thread. Mm-hmm. And boy, there's some science and some art there all mixed in. Yep.
Yeah. It's crazy once you start to get into this kind of thing, because you learn that literally everything you do has an effect on the final outcome. Like where you put the flax to red it, or if you like dried it at a certain time of year or whatever, everything changes, like the color and the fineness of it at the end. And it's kind of, a little bit overwhelming to know that everything affects it, but also a little bit freeing, because sometimes it's like, okay, well, something's gonna happen, and I don't know what it's gonna be, but it'll be okay in the end.
Well, yeah, because then you get to create your own, learn.
Yeah.
Hey, if I do this one little variation on the standard process, I get this, and and with this I can do this, and you can just build off of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So that's happening. Boy, that's coming right up here. We're recording this on the 6th of December. So that's coming right up. That's quite a life change for you.
I know. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. And I don't know the winter weather in Virginia. I suppose it's kind of 30s.
Yeah, it's pretty mild. I mean, honestly, after living in Chicago, anything is going to feel mild to me. So nothing like a polar vortex.
Yeah, it gets your full attention. That's right. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Allie, thanks so much. This has been fun, boy. And now, we gotta talk again once you've grown that flax and see what we have, and maybe even dyed it. That's going to be fun to learn about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Thanks so much. Enjoyed it.
Yep. Thank you.